When a man earns my respect, that means I do not rest. I devote all my energy, everything I have, to killing him. Here's your look at the Hot Toys Batman Arkham Origins. This is the Deathstroke 6-scale figure. Being that Deathstroke comes from the video game Masterpiece line, the product code for this figure is VGM030. If you're interested in picking this one up for yourself, you can head on over to Alter Ego Comics and order yours today. Now, there's a lot of cool stuff we're going to cover off on Deathstroke, but before we do anything, we have to, of course, figure out how tall. I have to figure out how tall. It's a requirement, I feel. It's something I can provide you guys as the necessary 411. According to the Ultrameasotron 5000, the 6 scale figure of Deathstroke stands exactly 13 inches in height, which works in centimeters out to be 33 centimeters exactly. Mind you, that height will increase if you end up displaying him. I will display him on the really cool display stand that they've included along with the figure. Here on the top, you've got Batman Arkham Origins underneath that, and a picture, a really nice image there of Deathstroke on the side. What's really neat about it, though, is they're utilizing that print, that label, where it's kind of got a little bit of a texturing to it. It's textured everywhere, actually, except for the Batman logo. It actually remains a little on the smoother side, but it's got a really neat look and neat design to it. It's not overly busy, and not one that advocates overly busy display stands. And it's not a scene specific either. It's not like it's just ground. This works well. This is just like a little marker to indicate who the character is, who the game, what the game is from, or what the character is from, what game. And then on the front placard, you've got the exact same thing kind of copied over here, etched in the metal. You've got Batman Arkham Origins, and underneath that, you've got Deathstroke. Deathstroke's almost even harder to make out. It almost gets lost in the mix because the logo is a little bit on the larger side. Not really sure what else they could have done for that other than maybe just bring the Batman logo over to the corner and then put Deathstroke in the front. But still, at least you know who owns this display stand, and I wouldn't advise taking it away from him. One thing that the figure also comes included with is a backdrop. And we've seen these backdrops used countless times, and I like to think I'm getting a little bit better with the assembly of them. I still find them a little on the flimsy side. It's essentially just a case of opening and folding this out and putting these cardboard struts on the side. You gotta feed the tabs through, and 9 times out of 10, there's always one tab I find that gets a little frayed in the mix of it. It's not something that I'm sure you could do repeatedly, so unless you're probably reviewing this for yourself, you probably will only do this once. Put on the cardboard sides, and then you've got yourself a standee. How successful the standee? Well, that's really up to anybody who is, that's the own personal opinions of the person that ends up collecting this for themselves. Ultimately, it does mean that you're going to be forfeiting a whole lot of space if you're going to somehow manage to squeeze this into a detolf, which I already think like it's way past the height of a standard detolf shelving. Ultimately, it's going to probably mean that you're going to be putting this on just floating shelves, which is, again, an entertaining idea to where you can display your figures. I know many people, like even like D Knight, for example, likes to display his figures with the backdrops behind it, and works well, I think. But they're a bit of a nuisance, though. I find I am somebody of the vein that displays a lot of my figures in detolfs, so ultimately right off the bat, that rules out the use of these. Specific characters, yes, sure, of course. If I end up finding the means to put them onto just shelving where space isn't an option or isn't so much a limitation, absolutely, I'll consider on a figure-to-figure basis. I mean, at least as the backdrop goes, it's not overly busy. I can say that. There's points can be given for the fact that it's specific to a scene, and I like that. It's always the case, though. Like I said, just the assembly of it is more just a hassle than anything else. But props, necessary props, I think, should be given to the fact that Hot Toys do include it. It's not something I don't think is really inflating the price of a figure too much. You can't certainly say, I really wish we didn't have these because we could save another $10, $15 on the figure. I really don't think that's the case. So really, this is something that on a, like I said, a person-to-person basis, one person may really like the idea of displaying these. I'm myself of somebody that doesn't have the space, so I simply just won't display it along with the figure. Let's get a good gander at the Arkham Origins Deathstroke, which I must say does look quite fantastic. There are a few little things that, of course, we're going to have to add on to him because he's already, as it goes now, quite armored up, but there are a few things that we can then kind of add on to it. A few extra spicings to the steak, if you will. But before we do that, I wanted to spend some time, much needed time, to discuss the detailing that they've managed to craft into the 6-scale figure release. I guess we can start where most people should want to start, and it's probably the head portrait. Head portrait is quite good here on Deathstroke. That half and half blue and orange motif that he's known for reflects quite well here, not only in the Arkham games, but also in the 6-scale version of Deathstroke here. He really does look quite good. I like the texturing. Specifically, I like the texturing that they put into the blue, instead of actually just outright giving it a smooth finish. Now, granted, all the things I'm about to say are specific to the way the character's designed in the game, so, I mean, it's not necessarily the decisions on Hot Toys necessarily to use this design of material, or at least the way that the material looks on this particular figure. But I must say, translating this figure from ideally just a video game sprite, a character, and translating it to an actual plastic figure that you can move around, something that has full articulation and lots of pockets and things to look at. I do think that Hot Toys did a good job on him. Normally also this would be the time that we would talk about his face, and face is not so much something we get a whole lot of when it comes to Deathstroke. In fact, really all you're getting for him is his one eye. I do think, though, it's nice that they've got all these little carvings and etches and scratches that his armor has taken over the years. I mean, that goes on both sides of his two-face portrait. Really love the fact also that they, around the areas of the scratching, there's almost a little hint indication of rusting or corrosion around those scratches. Ideally, I mean, you would imagine that the helmet, as well as most of the body plating, is done in metal. So as that metal gets scratched and worn away, there probably could be the indication of like a corrosion or rusting that happened around that. I really do think that turned out quite good. Good coloring. Good fine coloring, I must admit, as well on the blue, and equally so also on the orange. And even though, again, we only get one lone eye That eye speaks volumes, kind of like Tom Hardy's portrayal of Bane. It's really so much the emotion that gets captured around the eye area. And even though he is working at a handicap of only one eye, at the very least, I mean, that's a nicely done sculpted eye. Recessed further a little bit back into the mask there, so it does give you that sense of depth. Really nice job, though, on that head portrait. I guess while we're also at it, we could spin the figure around, as of course he's also known for having the, I don't know if the actual term for it, like the strappings that he has out from the helmet. It's not quite a headband or bandana. I mean, it's obviously like these little tasseled ribbons that come out from his head portrait. I don't really know what necessarily, again, you would call that. One thing I can call it, though, is posable. It is actually something that you can manipulate. You can bend and, do anything that you'll want with it. I mean, I kind of like the idea of having a wireframe in there because, again, that can do a little bit. I mean, really, up to the point of simply just displaying the figure, it's these nice little extra nuances like capes, and in this case, the ribbons that come out from the back of his helmet. Things of which like this that you can go in and then just kind of manipulate. If you kind of gauge which way wind is going to be coming over, you can then kind of correspondingly change the direction of these by having these wire frames. So I also like that as well. Lots of gashes, lots of indentations to not so much a pristine armor anymore. You can see some of that silver underneath the top coat there of his armor. You can even see like where some of the paint on the armor would have been chipped and worn away. Nice done on that as well. Yes, there's a visible hole there. Yes, we will talk about that in a second. All the nuances, though, of what you would expect Deathstroke to have, right down to his chainmail armor that's present there only on his forearms. It's nicely done there, and I guess that's not true. It's also in his torso section here. Now, there is a bit of swappability. Get a good gander quickly at this armor plating here on the front. See all the gashes, see all the tears, see all the scratches? Well, you can also change that out. It's simply just a case of prying this off. And it actually pries around the straps that go down to his harnessed belt. Just really going to pry that off from itself. Just pop that out like that, easy peasy. And you got two peg holes there and two pegs right there. You can swap it out, so I'm just going to put them down for a second because I want to show you the difference between the two. There's the one, a little bit smaller of a plating, and this was the one that we kind of started off with. The scratches are actually rather consistent with one another. You can look at the two and see that they're in the same placement as this one to this one here. They advertise this one as actually being a battle damage, although there's really no considerable damage done to it. It's simply just a smaller plating. Applying it is exactly the same thing, although you when you are putting it in, I mean, my defaulted way of procedure of going about doing this would be just to put it in straight. I find actually you almost got to put it in on an angle, because if you put it in on straight, it doesn't quite line up with the holes. So instead what you really want to do is kind of, instead of going like this, you kind of want to angle it down a little bit and then line that up. Just fits into place like so. It'll also fit around the black straps of his armor, and you just snap that in place. Now really, it's entirely up to you which route you would want to go to. I mean, going this way, you see a lot more of the visible suit underneath that. I kind of like the broader approach myself. Kind of just finishes off the armor nicely. But I just want to show you, I mean, underneath all of that, this meshed black suit that he's wearing underneath his armor. Again, it's entirely up to you which route you would want to go, but just again, showing you quickly, you can see a whole lot more gets covered over. I think it actually makes it look a little less like a figure when you use the broader plating. Again, if you want to use the more narrow plating, you can certainly do that as well. But one thing you do start seeing is you see a little bit more of gaps. Areas in which the arms would be in the socket sections, you're ultimately then seeing the sockets a little bit more visible, these little chasms of shadow, where like this would just be simply hollow. I probably wouldn't advise poking your finger in there, but simply just to show you that it's a little bit more visible if you go the route of this chest plate instead of this one right here. Let's go ahead and look at some of the other things. There's really, again, a lot to get a load of when it comes to this particular figure. You've got the bullets shotgun bullets on the sides of his shoulders. They do appear to be something that moves and shifts around, so be a little cautious of that. You don't want to accidentally lose one or two of those in the process, because it does seem like something that can completely, well, for the sake of argument, let's just show you, it does come out completely. And actually they've even sculpted in the gunpowder on the interior there of the casing, so really nice job done on that. Just be a little careful again. Down, all the way down, is not going to push them through, not from what I can see. Pushing them up, obviously, is where you're going to start losing them, so you don't want to certainly be losing those. He's got some flaps there on the, I guess would be a continuation of the armor top that he wears. A plated top. He's got all these little flaps that cascade down from that. It looks what seems to be a walkie-talkie right there, not something that you can remove. Then he's got a free-floating belt that sits over top of that. A few little pockets and nice little added little pouches and things that he has to it. On the back of his pants, he's got not quite workable pockets, but at least the indication there of pockets. And some of the other things we can, of course, look at is the fact he's got a pouch located on the side of his leg. And also on the side, he's got his holster to hold the supplied pistol. We'll look at that in a second. Continuing our vision down, where we can look at a lot more extra gashes, a lot of scratches, claws, and all the other things that he even kind of looks like in some cases he's got bullets that luckily have not penetrated the armor, but the plating certainly has sacrificed a little something as a result of it. Really, again, nice coloring on this guy. One thing I do want to talk about, and it's something I know I'm going to forget about if I don't talk about it just right now. I'm all about, if I talk about something right now, I won't forget it. If I leave it, I'm probably going to ultimately forget about all about it. I want to talk about these feet. When I did get this out of the packaging, I'm just taking the foot off, and you're probably wondering why is this guy taking this foot off? When I did take this out of the packaging, this may only be something that is attached to this figure and only this figure alone, but I did notice, I'm not even going to take this off as well. You'll see there's a ball joint, and the ball joint sits inside the cavity of the foot. Before it does that, however, it has to attach to this foam cap. It's kind of like a beer cozy, for example. The ball joint sits on top of that, but when I did get this out of the packaging, this was already attached to the ball joint, and I couldn't get the foot to go back into, I couldn't get the peg, I should say, to get back into the foot. What I ended up having to do was I had to glue the foam back into the foot. I did question why the ball joint simply just didn't go into, or why the ball joint, for example, wasn't a larger ball joint and simply went into a socket that was fit for the size of the ball joint, rather than having to add these extra assisting pieces. Because really, if I just found, again, it was shifting around. I couldn't get it back into the foot. As you can see, I'll just kind of twist it back on. I did wonder why, again, they simply just didn't put the ball joint right into the socket of the foot. I guess the only thing I can come up with is they add like a little bit of a cushion. Like anything else, moving the joint back and forth, I guess they just wanted to muffle that a little bit by adding a little bit of extra cushion and padding. I don't know personally why. It could have been almost just as successful, I guess, having the larger ball joint, but it's something I do want to mention. Like, as a result of it, I do find the foot, this particular foot, is really loose. It's not going to be so much the issue when I'm going to be adding back the shin guard, if you will, but it is still a little on the loose side. I wish this wasn't the case, and I can't really think of what else they could have done differently to it. Oh, right, yeah. Except for making the ball joint a little bit larger and maybe even keeping the ball socket of the foot so you didn't need this extra piece connecting the two. Now, there is some additional housekeeping you can do with your Deathstroke when you get him immediately out of the box. Leaving it to this point in this review, because I did want to show you guys the armor, I didn't want stuff in the way of it, but he does also include a pouched bandolier, something in which you can then drape over top of his shoulder. This is something, of course, you can very, very much leave out if you don't want to have it on him. But I think it does add a little bit extra because, of course, he's always armored up. He's got all these pockets and pouches of things that he needs in order to hunt down whoever he's currently going after, perhaps even the Batman. The pouch itself, all the individual pouches are not something of which that can be opened up, nor they store anything in there other than just storing some squares of foam. It is nice looking. Like I said, I think it enhances the figure to include it. So we're going to go ahead and add that right now. Now, when you are putting it on him, you want to put it to the fact that the larger pouches are going to be up to the tops of his shoulders. Or another way, another indicator, is this silver clip is going to go to the bottom. It's going to sit around the belt section. Let me go ahead and show you how that works. We're going to go ahead and take the figure. First thing we're going to do is take the head and pop it off of the ball joints. So sorry, Deathstroke, we're just going to do this for one quick second. And again, following the instructions that I just provided, we're going to drape that over top of his shoulder. I think the instructions actually indicate that you put it over top of this section of his armor. It's entirely up to you what you want to do. One thing, though, that the instructions also indicates, and I find I have had a difficult time to try to accomplish this, is these little snaps right here. There's one there, and there's one there. In theory, what it's supposed to be able to do is, if we give it a little extra additional slack, I just move the arm up just for 1 second. On the interior of the bandolier, there are two matching corresponding snaps that are going to snap into this. In theory, I have yet to be able to actually stretch this far enough out. And there doesn't seem to be any adjustments that you can do to the bandolier. It's stitched here, and it's stitched here. There is no other place, from what I can see, that allows adjustments. You have to basically deal with what you've got as it goes. And I quite frankly, I can't get those snaps in place. So, I mean, it's simply just a case, I guess, of keeping the bandolier in place. Nothing is necessarily telling you it has to go and it has to attach to the side. Again, I find I can't get it. I mean, stretching it, I still can't get it in place. So for that, I'm just going to likely leave it be. It still serves what purpose it needs to serve. One thing you will want to do, though, is flip this around. And here in the back is, remember that hole we were talking about? This will hold and attach, or rather I should say the sheath will attach to that hole via this plug right here. Love the look of this very large sheath. And inside of that, of course, stores his trusty katana, which has just some really cool details to it. I like that the blade is also a very dark gunmetal silver. It's not very light. And it looks like it would have real weight to it. I mean, it is a heavy piece for being plastic, but I can only imagine wielding this in real life, how much weight this actually would be based on the sizing of even like the blade, which is very broad katana blade. Again, we're just going to slide that back into the supplied sheath. And to attach this to here, the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to unsnap this section of the bandolier. Just detach it from itself. It works the same snap system, 2 S's, as the snaps that were supposed to snap to the side, which again I just can't quite get. You're going to take the supplied, you're going to take the sheath there, fit it through this hole, and then fit it through the hole of his torso. Just kind of push it in, just kind of, you don't hear like a snap. I certainly would hope you don't hear a snap, but you'll know when it's in there. Then go ahead and take the snap, close everything up, close up shop, and you're good to go. And it's nice that it finishes that off. It looks like it's intended to be there. It simply doesn't look like it's just an afterthought. I like that it looks like it's part of this harness that he's wearing. And there is what we have so far. So we've got the bandolier attached. We've got now the sheath slid on in. You can see how I wanted to get to this part of the review a little bit after the fact of showing you what his armor looks like, simply just because there's a lot of extra kind of added things that you have to do to this figure. And then we're going to go ahead and just replace the head, just kind of wiggle that back onto the ball joint, which can be a little difficult at times. Just going to wiggle that on like so. And then you've got Deathstroke all finished. Let's have a look at the rest of his accessories. The first accessories we'll have a look at for Deathstroke are a pair of grenades. The grenades are done in a dark gray color, with the pin being done in silver and the clip being in black. These are supposed to attach to his belt, and I did leave these off just to show you how they attach into place. You've got these 2 little looplets that stick out from his belt. In theory, the clips, the part of the grenade, is supposed to slide onto it. I'm always worrying that while I'm doing this, if I'm not careful, I'm going to snap those. So I'm just kind of wiggling those in place. There's really not a lot of clearance on the actual part, the clip part of the grenade. I mean, sure, you could pry this out just a little bit to snap onto, snap's not really the greatest of words to be using, but to latch onto, that sounds better, latch on those little looplets on the sides of his belt. I don't personally find that they hold very well, and I can't really think what else I would have done differently to attach these in place. There's no other means, from what I can see, nor in the instructions do they indicate any other way to attach it. They simply just show where the grenades are supposed to go, and I guess you're just supposed to guess to the fact that you're supposed to attach it by this point here. As you can see, though, it barely sticks out. So caution should be made, can't stress that enough. Caution should be made when you are putting the grenades onto the sides of his belt that you don't accidentally break them. Moving on to slightly larger accessories, he also does come with his ballistic staff. It's a really neat representation of the staff that he has in the game, comprised again of this kind of neat, dark, it's not quite silver, it's almost even hard to kind of pinpoint the color. I want to say gunmetal, but gunmetal generally isn't as shiny as this. But it actually holds around the hilt section, the middle section of the ballistic staff, and it's got this neat kind of slightly tarnished airbrushing that they've done to the actual length, the actual post sections, the longer parts of the staff, have this slight kind of discoloration. I don't know if you can see it or not. It's a little bit more of an airbrushed darker gray that they've added here and in sporadic places as you make the full length, the full journey to the end of the staff there. One thing that you can really do, one thing you can do that's really kind of cool about the ballistic staff too, is that you can detach these. Say you want to make it a little bit shorter, you will detach it. So basically the black sections of the handle, you're going to detach the ballistic staff from that section. I find it's easy just to twist it. Twist it as you are pulling it out, rather than simply just forcing it out. Just kind of wiggle it back and forth. It is just on a peg system, and I find this peg here seems the tightest of the two. Every single time I've put this one in, it seems it's just really tight. I don't know if it's maybe just the fact that the hole on this side of the staff is just, maybe it's a little bit smaller. I don't really know, but it does seem like it fits a little more difficult this side than on this side here. Why I did take these off, in case you are wondering, is that they do give you also the ends of the staff. Let me just show you. It's exactly the same. You can see right there on side to side, exactly the same. Obviously this one has the length going for it, but this would be in case you wanted to display it, not extended out, retracted. And just pop those into place like so, and you've got yourself a shortened version of the ballistic staff. That's pretty cool, I like that. Of course, he wouldn't be Deathstroke unless he had at least one pistol. And he gets at least one pistol. Actually, that's the only weapon he gets. That's not 100% true. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. The pistol has been done in that same kind of dark gray. It's not quite silver. It's a couple of shades down from that. And I really, again, like that they've added the little airbrushing, kind of just kind of tarnished sections of it so it doesn't look new and pristine. You can take this, and it does pull back. But it doesn't pull back at the top section here. Rather, instead, it actually pulls from the middle. That's not something I'm used to seeing. Normally, the top would slide its way back. Here, it's actually a case where it slides from the middle. I don't know if you can see it or not. There is a bullet in there. Of course, it also does have the removable clip, and to get that, there's this little lip just on the side. And again, it's places you normally would not be pulling from. I mean, if this was sitting in the handle like so, I would imagine it would be pulling it from here. Rather, that's not the case. You're pulling it from the front. And you can just remove the clip out, and there's the bullet, the same bullet we were looking at the very top of the, I guess, the chamber of the clip. We're going to slide that back into place. And then if you don't want to display a Deathstroke with the pistol, by all means, you can also then go ahead and take this and slide it into the holster. One thing though you will be competing with, as you probably saw just now, as you are putting the pistol into the actual holster, you may be fighting with the fact that there is this one large sheath. Oh right, yeah. It's one giant sheath that's sticking down, so you kind of have to kind of get around it to get the pistol back into the holster like this. Deathstroke will also get himself the remote claw. So that's why I said that's not technically the only weapon he comes with. He also comes with the remote claw. Nice representation of the remote claw from the game. You can see the chamber, the tank chamber there, even with the meter readout there along the top. And like in the game, he does also have the claw, which can attach or detach from the top of it, and it just fits into place like so. One thing I've noticed though, and I'm just going to put this to the side for the time being, I didn't know actually these are something that can move and shift around. However, you're probably seeing it right now. Not this one. This one is permanently kind of fixed. It's not going to move around on you. This one, however, though, the one that detaches, it's really loose. And I guess for the purpose of what you're going to be using it for, it's not too much of a concern that it's loose, but it's something still of which I have to point out to you guys. They attach together. The larger peg attaches to the hole on the other side there, and just kind of, like I said, fits into place. And then from there, you can just attach this by the smaller peg to the hole on the front, and that just fits into place like so. It's neat that they would have included this. Certainly of the vast amount of weapons that he uses at his disposal, at least I am glad that they would have included this as a possibility. Just again, feel a little disappointing that this part, the actual hinge part, which I guess I could probably go in and, I don't know if I could add a little bit of floor polish or something like that just to make those joints a little stiff. But it's just a shame that this is as loose as it is. The other neat thing about it is you can detach it, and he also comes with a wire. You can separate the two halves from one another, just like so. And you can put one end into the hole, like that. And you can take the other end, and it just attaches on this side. They're unique to one another. In other words, you have to have one plug going on this side, and it only goes on this side, doesn't go on this side, if that makes any sense. And you can attach them like so. The thing is, they don't stay in place very well, and ultimately when it's all said and done, I can't see myself likely using the wire as a part of the accessory. I'll likely just kind of put the claw back. I'll kind of keep everything together and keep the remote claw intact. But again, it's nice the fact that Hot Toys would include such a thing like this. Rounding out the rest of his accessories, he comes with, of course, a series of interchangeable hands. Currently, just to record it for the books, I do have a pair of relaxed hands. A pair of relaxed hands I've got in the sockets of the forearms. The other things he does come with, and we always seem to go down this road first, is the slightly more boring road, and that is a pair of molded fists. Now, for all the cool accessories that this figure possesses in his disposal, I don't know why they would include fists. I mean, it's fine, I guess, on one hand, on the one hand, if, say, you're displaying the figure, I don't know, holding the pistol, then yeah, okay, maybe you can display him with the closed fist, like that strong kind of stance, that powerful stance, if you want to have him displayed with that. I personally always find that fists are the last option I usually end up going with, but Hot Toys did include those. I have to mention those, of course. The other hands that he comes included with are ones for holding the staff, as you can see. They're not really suited for anything other than holding the staff due to the nature of the very small hole that are inside these hands here. The figure also does come with a couple of weapon hand holding hands. Weapon hand holding hands? You know what I mean. Hands for holding, like the pistol, for example. Hands for holding the remote claw. Now, I did notice, though, like the remote claw, a couple of these hands are quite finicky. This one I find is the most. It seems just the grip is way too small. I know you would say that then this should be used for the pistol, but again, I find the same problem happens. 9 times out of 10, I'm using usually this hand here. And we just kind of kind of fit the remote claw into his hand. It's just, I would almost even say that these hands, some of these hands, specifically like this hand, some of these hands just aren't suited for holding the weapons properly. Even like using this hand, for example, the pistol, I find like the trigger finger doesn't sit in the right place. Maybe one extra hand could have been afforded so that when you are displaying the figure, for example, it would actually look like he's holding it and ready to fire it. The last hand, the final hand, I suppose, is a gripping hand, which really doesn't serve any other purpose. I guess you could put the grenade into his hand, but it doesn't really serve any other purpose than just being a dynamic hand. And there's nothing really wrong with a dynamic hand. I'm going to do my best to kind of keep everything on him, like the bandolier and the sheath, while we look at his articulation. The articulation is the following on Deathstroke. His head is on a dumbbell ball joint. What do I mean by that? It's a ball joint that is on both ends of a shaft, essentially, and it's shaped exactly the same way as a dumbbell. One is attached to the socket section of his head, which allows rotation, like I said, all the way around if you wanted to, hinge up and down. But then you got a secondary ball joint that attaches to the base of the neck, and this is actually quite nice that they add as much as they do. You got basically a ball joint there and a ball joint there, but then at the base of the neck, you've got the exact same thing happening, resulting in a figure that you can get a lot more posability out of him than what you would with a regular, let's say a 6-scale figure that normally would only have one dumbbell ball joint attached just solely to the neck. Because usually a lot of times these figures, the head is part of the neck. Here, luckily, on the case of Deathstroke, his head is completely a separate piece from his neck, meaning that you can get some extra posability out of this guy that you wouldn't normally be able to get. His upper torso, now here is where he falls into the same problem that many figures have when they have a lot of stuff over top of their fabric suits. It does ultimately mean it hinders, almost completely eliminates any posability that you can get in his torso. I'm convinced there is a crunch somewhere in there. Hello? Hello, crunch? Are you in there? Somewhere in there, there is an ab crunch. Unfortunately, though, there's not really much you can do with it because he is so encased in other things. These dense plastic plates certainly does a number for when it comes to moving this guy around. The argument certainly could be made for based on what other things the figure can do. A crunch on his abdomen is probably the last thing that people are going to be missing necessarily, because again, you can do a whole lot more with other aspects of the figure, like for example his arms. His arms hinge out to about there, giving you roughly not quite a 90-degree angle, it's actually more like a 45-degree angle, and they move forward and they move back. He has a swivel actually at the bicep section, and he's got a double hinge on the elbow. Luckily, not too much is impeding the arms from being able to get a bend as much as they are. Luckily, this is made of a slightly thinner plastic, almost it's not quite plastic, it's kind of more like a vinyl, I suppose, on the actual scaling there. The chainmail, it's not quite chainmail, but you know what I mean. He does have the double hinge on the elbow happening there. And then for each of his hands, the hands rotate all the way around like standard 6-scale figures. One problem that will come across as you probably are doing this for yourself, I've done this so frequently already, because he's got the gauntlet that sits relatively low on his forearm, it does kind of at times push the hand off, or there's not nearly enough clearance where a long enough peg is sticking out to attach the hands in place. I wish for pieces like this, they would incorporate slightly longer pegs that would stick out further out from the gauntlets, so it would make things like putting hands back into place a little bit more easier. Moving our attention down to his lower half, his articulation for his legs, Deathstroke has leg articulation that splits to about there. You can move the legs forward, you can move the legs back. He has a swivel on what seems to be the top cut of the thigh. He has a double hinge on the knee. He has a rotation, but a lot of times you feel like you're rotating just the calf guard here. But he does have articulation here, and of course he has the articulation in the feet. Again, this foot isn't so much the problem. I find this foot here is really, really loose. And I'm just wondering if a lot of that can be chalked up to the fact that when I did get this out of the packaging, that little foam cap, that little beer cozy, was popped out. Actually, it was while I was taking the plastic off the foot, and it stayed with the ball joint. I just wasn't able to get it perfectly back in place, ultimately relying again on a little bit of glue, something I didn't really want to do, and I had to glue that little cozy back in place to hold the ball socket. I've always been a big fan of Deathstroke in the comics. There's something always, for me, the love for characters that break the mold when it comes to design. Normally, when you get a helmeted or masked character, both of their eyes are looking straight at you. Deathstroke has a rather unique, non-symmetrical design to his helmet, where you really only see half of his face. He only has one eye looking right at you, and believe you me, that's enough. Deathstroke, well represented in the Arkham Origins game, unfortunately couldn't be said for the same when it came to his cinematic universe appearance. Of course, we got the post-credits kind of Easter egg glimpse at what could have been, where an escaped Lex Luthor discusses plans with Deathstroke to maybe start their own quote-unquote league. After that, we got glimpses and teases that Deathstroke may play somewhat of a strong, pivotal character in the standalone Batman film that Ben Affleck was working on. And much like Justice League, unfortunately, no, that never played out. So we can kind of live vicariously through what a really neat design that we ended up getting here from Hot Toys. Ultimately, I might even just find myself pairing this right next to Ben Affleck's Batman, as it really should have been right from day one. The neat thing about this guy is that he's got a lot of stuff you can look at. Even all the little nooks and crannies, there's scars, there's scrapes, there's damage really to his armor, that there's always something new that you can find fascination with when it comes to looking at this guy. He's got lots of weapons, probably more than you can really make use of for his two individual hands. Luckily, at least they do give you the suited hands for holding the weapons, although I do kind of wish the hands could have held some of the weapons a little bit better than what they did. I think ultimately, when it's all said and done, I'm probably just going to ultimately display Deathstroke here with his katana, because who doesn't love the idea of Deathstroke wearing and wielding a katana? I'm all about wielding katana Deathstroke. If you guys are interested in picking this one up for yourself, some good news is it's currently available over at Alter Ego Comics. That's where I actually picked this one up for myself. Alter Ego Comics has very quickly become my go-to place when it comes to online shopping, specifically for 6-scale figures. One of the things I really like about Alter Ego Comics, for example, is the fact that they double box their 6-scale figures. I can tell you, probably on one hand at least, the number of times that I've had a shipping box, you know, those regular brown mailer boxes, arrive, and it's gotten water damage because, again, there's nothing else really protecting it. I appreciate the fact that Hot Toys do put at least their figures into a mailer box, but sometimes you need a little bit more than that. And luckily, the folks over at Alter Ego Comics double boxes. So basically, they take that brown mailer box and they put it inside a larger box with much needed packing and a little bit of TLC. And that's one of the things I really like about them. They offer free shipping on many of their 6-scale figure releases, and their customer service is some of the best I've seen online. If you guys, again, are interested in picking this one up for yourself, you can head on over to Alter Ego Comics right now and order this guy now. And the folks over at Alter Ego Comics want to offer you guys, the viewers, a coupon code of SPOT15. What that basically means is on $150 or more, one coupon per visit, you can save yourself $15. Translating that, if you guys are interested in picking up Deathstroke for yourself, he's obviously going to be a little bit more than $150. You can save $15 right off the top. Can't beat that. All about savings. And the folks over at Alter Ego Comics are all about savings too. So make sure you use the coupon code SPOT15 if you're interested in picking this guy up for yourself. Speaking of getting this for yourself, if you have managed to pick up Deathstroke, let me know down below in the comments section what you guys think of the figure. I always like reading your comments. And also, if you're new to this channel or a long-time viewer and just maybe never got around to doing it, make sure you hit that subscribe button and swing on over. Right next door is the bell notification. I don't really know why you have to turn on a bell notification if you're already subscribed to a channel, but I don't work for YouTube. Well, I guess I somewhat work for YouTube. Either way, make sure you turn that bell notification on to full notifications, as certainly more videos are going to be coming soon to this channel, and you don't want to miss out on them. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.